I'm Renee Galvan. I'm the president and CEO of HAR. I started with HAR in 1996, and I became executive vice president in 1998. HAR is already known as the greatest association in America, and I really just want to build on the foundation that has been built. Members are the heart of the organization, and I really want to hear from you to know what's working and what isn't, so we can continue to make HAR the very best. HAR's commitment to its members will never change. Technology might change, the market will change, but we will always be here to serve you. I met my wife at the University of Texas. We are both CPAs. One of my sons is a CPA, and my other son is an engineer. I guess that makes us a numbers family. HAR is here for you. I'm excited for what's ahead, and I'm honored to serve as the president and CEO of HAR.
What's the best thing you can do when selling your home?
Make sure it's on HAR.com.
HAR.com is where other sites get their home data. So when it's listed here, it's everywhere.
Plus, on HAR.com, homebuyers get access to tools they can trust and the most up-to-date home listings online.
Don't miss out on more potential shoppers, offers, and a faster sale when selling your home.
So ask your agent.
Is your home on HAR.com?
When it came time to buy a new home, I needed the perfect Zen.
I needed the perfect office.
The perfect schools.
The perfect deal.
Whatever your perfect is, you'll find it on HAR.com. Because HAR.com is where almost all of the homes in your area are listed for sale first, and where those other home sites get their listings from. Plus, we've got the shopping tools you can actually trust. So when you're ready to find your perfect, shop HAR.com.
Honey, is our home listed on HAR.com?
Yeah, I just went live. Why?
This is way better than my sister's place.
I know. I guess it works.
Well, HAR.com is where almost all homes are listed first and where the other websites pull their homes from.
Oh, is that quartz?
So when we list our home on HAR.com, it gets listed everywhere, which means
more potential shoppers, offers, and a faster sale.
Exactly.
It's giving home.
Good morning and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media and Sponsorships for HAR. Before we get started with this week's Member Focus Monday, I want to mention that this week's episode and the HAR On the Move podcast are sponsored by the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities. We'll share more about them later in the show. Today, we are talking about something every realtor deals with at some point, and that's handling difficult conversations, whether it's a tough client, a tense negotiation, or a misunderstanding with another professional. How you respond can make all the difference. And joining us today is Tracy Brown, who specializes in communication and inclusion to help us navigate these situations and walk away with better outcomes. Welcome to the show, Tracy.
Hey, Christina. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is an important conversation so that we all have better conversations. But before we dive into, I have a lot of questions for you today. Before we dive into all of that, though, can you share your background and the work you do around communication and inclusion?
Sure. So I work with leaders and organizations all over the country to get business results by paying attention to relationships with colleagues, customers, and the community. And with HAR specifically, I'm on the faculty for TRLP. I've had the opportunity to work with both staff and HAR members on leadership development, communication skill development, and the strategic development of collaboration between HAR and the affiliate associations.
Very good. Thank you. And we really appreciate the work that you've been doing with us over the last few years. I think we've made some big strides, and I think that's something we should all be proud of. In real estate, difficult conversations are a part of the job. Why do you think so many agents struggle with them?
Well, when I think about it, from what I know about the industry, conflict has to be really common because when real estate combines money, number one, the personal identity that people have, the deadlines, all the deadlines and the stress, their legal obligations, their ethical obligations, and then you toss in a little bit of emotion around many of the transactions. And so difficult conversations come up all the time. And I think agents struggle and professionals in the industry struggle with these conversations because one, for many people in the industry, they're really relationship oriented. They're driven by the relationships with people. And when there's tension or conflict, you don't want to risk the relationship. Compensation, as soon as you get money involved, I'm going to struggle with having a touchy conversation with you if I think it's going to affect my money, relationships with cooperating agents, like all of that puts stress on it. And then just the human idea of no one likes rejection. And so you don't want things to go south and then be in a situation where you don't make the deal or you lose respect, all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What are some of the most common types of challenging situations that you see realtors facing?
Over the last few years, what I've heard a lot about when people share examples with me, it's the misunderstanding around contract terms. That comes up a lot. Trust, disclosure, like did they really tell me what was wrong with the house, or did they really tell me how the decision is going to be made and who needs to be involved? And all of that kind of falls under managing the reputation that you have in the industry. And then when you look at different aspects of the realtor's job, some of the things that I've heard from realtors, it makes it really difficult when when there are family disagreements getting in the way of especially a retail or a home buying situation. Two or three other things that come to mind, separate from residential, right? Missing the lender, missing the underwriting deadlines. Like people have mentioned that so many times, or the transaction fails. And, those are the kinds of things that come up so frequently. Sometimes I think, well, I know that has to have happened to you before. So what have you done to resolve that in the past? But every time it feels new for some people.
Yeah. April is Fair Housing Month, and we're kind of at the end of April here. And something that was brought up at the beginning of the month with Alexia Smokler from NAR was when you have those tough conversations, specifically with sellers, if they're kind of guiding you in a way that is going to violate fair housing, how do you handle that conversation? So specific to that, but also just generally, when a conversation starts to get tense, Tracy, what should an agent really focus on in that moment?
So two or three examples come to mind, but let me start with your reference to fair housing. So I assume that all realtors and all members of HAR are very familiar with the NAR ethics and professional standards.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, actually, when things start to get tense and they're related to anything that's connected to fair housing or anything that's connected to ethical standards or professional standards, I think one of the most important things is to back up and go there first so that you remove the idea that it's a personal opinion or it is just the way you want to do business or don't want to do business. That, when you are reminding yourself and others that no, we have agreed to work with and to follow these professional standards, it's like slow down a little bit in order to go. But then a couple of other examples come to mind, and I have changed the names, so I will use names to tell the story, but these are not the actual names of the agents who shared these examples with me. So let's call her Angela. Some of you have had situations where the seller was sure that the agent was underselling the home, and it gets really tense because the agent has all this information. So Angela was working with the seller who was absolutely convinced her home should list for nearly $75,000 above market value. And the seller kept saying, but my house is better than the one down the street. Or, my house is different and it should be more. And emotionally, she was right. Her house was her home. She had raised children there. She had hosted holidays there, right? It was special. And Angela showed her comps. Angela showed her market trends. Angela showed her buyer behavior in that zip code. Angela showed her days on market reports, all the stuff, right? And none of it mattered because the seller was not having a pricing conversation. The seller was actually having a grief conversation. And we don't think about that because we're focused on get the business. I'm giving you all the data. I'm giving you the information that I use to advise you. And you're supposed to say yes, like get with the program. But it got really tense. And Angela thought, okay, well, I don't know where to go next. And then something within her realized that for this seller, lowering the price was like dishonoring what the home represented to her. And the tension was that Angela's giving her data and the seller is dealing with emotion. And data will never win over emotion. And so luckily Angela did recognize what was going on and shifted her approach. And she stopped trying to convince the seller. And she started just giving the seller the feedback, acknowledging what the home meant to her, repeating some of that. And then once that seller felt like, oh, okay, you really get it, you understand me, then the seller could hear the data. Angela, or you or me or anyone, we could use something that's like, okay, now let's talk strategy. Once that seller felt seen. And so the tension was like the balloon just deflated. And the lesson for all of us is to remember the client asks for information, but what they first need is emotional safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So when things get tense, right, is it the business issue? Or is it you need to create trust or safety or simply acknowledge what that individual is dealing with? Can I give you another example?
Of course, yeah.
So this one is more related to, well, it's still residential, but it's related to when you're coordinating and you're the realtor and you're coordinating with other vendors. And so let's use Marcus as a name for this one.
Okay.
So Marcus had a buyer under contract. Looked like a great property, right? Marcus referred in an inspector he had worked with before. The inspector had a solid reputation, was dependable, was professional, and the inspector came back saying there were major problems with the foundation. I know there are some listeners and viewers who are going, yep, that's happened to me. So the buyer now is panicking. The seller was offended. And somehow Marcus was standing in the middle, like he had personally poured the concrete or, messed up things. And so the buyer asked Marcus, well, you recommended the inspector. How did you not know this? So Marcus realized the conflict wasn't really about the inspection report, even though that was creating all the tension and all of the conflict. It was really about the transfer of trust. When realtors recommend a vendor, the consumer almost always assumes that the realtor is guaranteeing certain outcomes.
Right.
And we know that's not true, but sometimes the consumer doesn't if they are not really experienced with home buying, home selling, or in commercial with leasing. So what Marcus did was he stayed calm, very important, and he explained what it meant to refer a resource, and that has nothing to do with the condition of the house, right? And kind of de-escalate it and help them see on both sides what next steps could be and would be. And I don't know, I think the lesson here is that conflicts with vendors can become your conflict as the realtor, just like that, even when you didn't create the problem. And so what is possible? Framing it differently up front and being sure that you explain that so you don't have to slow down the process later and defend yourself. So those are just a couple of examples of the kind of tension that comes up like this. And people are always watching how you handle the pressure. So slow down. Is there something emotional happening here? Is there something cultural happening here? Is language that has offended someone? Is something legal happening here? And then always going back to, wait a minute, what's our shared goal? And what's the opportunity here? So those are the things I keep in mind when conflict comes up.
Those are great examples. Thank you so much. And I think they're pretty common examples. I mean, I know the lowering the price one that you mentioned, it's something we hear all the time. And, dealing with different vendors or referrals and things, those are things that happen every day. So it's really important to have those conversations. What are some common mistakes or reactions that tend to make situations worse?
Ignoring the problem when it's small. Oh, well, we'll just keep going. No. Resolve it when it's a small frustration because it can grow into something bigger. Probably the biggest mistake is that we, as professionals, we get defensive. I've got all the data. I did this right. I'm following the rules. I'm really good at what I do. You should trust me, right? We get defensive and we start defending ourselves or our recommendation, which really just blows up the tension or the mistrust even more. We avoid the real issue, right? We focus on a part of it, but that's not the real issue. And we unintentionally do or say something that might be culturally offensive or inappropriate, because usually it's not offensive. We know the things that are blatant, but it might be sensitive, or we may not even recognize. I was talking to a realtor a couple of years ago, and they had expressed some frustration and impatience with a couple who were buying a home. And the couple was really offended because the realtor said something similar to, well, you really love this home. You keep saying you really love this home, and there's not, I've answered all of your questions. You've come to see back to see the property. It's going to sell. You need to make a decision. Well, this was family, a couple of Asian descent. They were clear they were not going to move forward until the eldest member of their family had seen the property and had blessed the transaction. And this conversation happened when they were talking to the realtor about bringing their family, their grandparents, to look at the house. And the realtor got a little impatient, not understanding that culturally, this family, this couple was not going to move forward until the eldest members of the family had seen it and blessed it. And they didn't have to, but they had chosen to fly their grandparents in from Chicago. And so it took a little bit, right, to coordinate all of it. And the realtor didn't lose the contract, but ended up creating something they had to clean up because it was sensitive. And it worked out great because they apologized. They said they weren't aware. They invited the couple to educate them more. And, and it ended up fine. But that's one of the things that makes situations work. And then the final thing that comes to mind in this moment is we make things worse because we don't document the decisions or the agreements that we've made together. We're like, I'm going to trust my memory, or I'm going to trust their memory. And then it gets worse because 3 weeks later, you're like at cross purposes.
Yeah. That's where those per my last emails come in, right, Tracy?
Yes.
Yes. A couple comments that came in, I just wanted to mention quickly. HTX Properties said grief conversation, going back to earlier when you were talking about the seller, grief conversation, so important to recognize. And you're, I think it was a really good example to bring up again, because it's daily, I'm sure, that our members are hearing those kind of conversations or having those conversations. Erica made a comment. Our clients just want to hear from us often, even when no real update is available. So that constant communication is what their clients are looking for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If there are any questions for Tracy, type those in and we'll get to as many as we can. So we talked about ways that we can make it worse, which we don't want to do, of course. What are a few practical ways to de-escalate or keep a conversation productive?
Yes. So be proactive, right? So make sure that you go over the timelines and that your client or consumer actually understands the realities of the pricing that you're agreeing to, rather than just, I'm saying this is the right price. So if you're de-escalating and you didn't do that up front, then that's the time to, again, slow down just a little bit and go through some of the details, the timeline, the pricing, the inspections that will happen. What are the limitations related to vendors, or what are the opportunities that are coming up? My number one tip for de-escalating, though, is not data-based.
Mm.
My number one tip for de-escalating is to be curious. Like, to really listen to the other person or the other side until you can actually summarize their opinion or their need from their perspective. It doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but we jump to answering the problem or fixing the problem so fast that's many, many times I'm not really curious about, wait a minute, why are you saying that? Or why is that important to you? Or what are you understanding about the next steps in the process? So be curious so that you are de-escalating the correct thing. And even though it's hard, that does require us to separate emotion from fact. Now, both fact and feelings are data that you need, but you need often to deal with the other side's feelings. Not, no, you don't have to be a psychologist or a counselor or a therapist, but to understand where they're coming from so you can get to the point of saying something like, now I understand why that is so frustrating for you. Let's walk through together and create a strategy for where we go from here. So those are the things. Be curious, use fact and feeling, and then, of course, slow down and go through the data again and make sure you're on the same page.
Yeah. I like that verbiage that you used because I do think, realtors do oftentimes feel like a counselor or a therapist, but that verbiage allows you to support them, understand them, but also create a boundary that I'm here to help in this matter, not all matters, right? So yeah, I really appreciate that verbiage that you used. I wanted to share another comment that came in from Nancy first. You were mentioning the cultural differences and understanding that and how that could affect conversations. And Nancy just said, I recommend all agents take the CIPS designation, which is the Certified International Property Specialist designation. And I know HAR is going to be offering it in the fall. I don't think we have the exact dates yet. Maybe we do, but I know we will be offering it this fall. So there's a good resource course that can really help understand those cultural differences so that you can make those conversations easier. Yes, Tracy, go ahead.
Well, and one of the things I want to add, so often when we talk about cross-cultural communication or cross-cultural conflict resolution, or just the cultural impact on communication, sometimes people assume that that's only related to race. But I just want to remind people that when we are talking about culture, we're talking about all different ways that we are acculturated in society. So if you are working with a client, commercial, you're working with a client who's in a very different age group than you, you're going to have some cultural norms that could clash in terms of how you work together or how you communicate or the examples you use. You might be working with, a couple of years ago, we did an HAR webinar on homes that accommodated people with different types of disabilities. And it was fascinating that, oh, yeah, I forgot that people who are blind have some different cultural needs, or people who use a wheelchair for mobility may have some different needs, and that, or may have a different cultural way of engaging with business or living in their home. And so culture, yes, we want to look at race and ethnicity and primary language spoken. And we also want to look at age, disability, sexual orientation, what are socioeconomic areas and levels. All of those things have a culture of their own. And if you're working with someone who is different from you, you do need to be aware and alert that the way you communicate and the way you think to approach a problem might not match. And that's why the cultural exposure is so important, so you can even know what to anticipate.
Wonderful. And another comment that came in from Reed, I see a few people were saying CIPS is on my list. They're wanting to take that class. From Rita, our Director of Professional Development, she said CIPS dates will be made available in the next couple of months. NAR's C2EX program is also a great resource. Commitment to excellence is what that stands for. So she shared a link with us there. So that's really helpful. Thank you, Rita. Tracy, so I know that you've kind of already addressed this, but I think it's important that we address it. And it's kind of funny because of the question. What advice would you give to an agent who tends to avoid difficult conversations together? So we're not going to avoid this question. What would you say to an agent that's avoiding difficult conversations?
So actually, there's so much you can do on your own to study conflict resolution. Like now that we have the internet, now that we have artificial intelligence, now that we have things that you can access on your own, so you can make a commitment that you're going to look up tips or skills and practice them. There is a guy who's right now my favorite resource around conflict. His name is Ryan Dunlap, and he has an Instagram series and a YouTube series called Conflict Ish. And he was a hostage negotiator. So he was in conflict all the time. And so look up Ryan Dunlap or Conflict Ish and just follow. He has on Instagram like 90-second snippets. You could spend 20 minutes looking at snippets and go, ooh, oh yeah, I need to that. There's an intercultural conflict inventory that I use a lot with clients, and I love it because it gives you a way to frame what conflict is happening and what's your conflict style when you get in conflict. Do you tend to be a direct communicator or an indirect communicator? Does your emotion get in, or do you like manage your emotion and put it in a box? So that conflict style inventory actually shows you for diagnostic purposes. Oh, I tend to go to discussion. No, I tend to go to accommodating the other person. I want to really engage, or I'm kind of a mix of them. And then you can also notice in whoever you're having the conflict with what their style is, and it helps you figure out what to do. Of course, a couple of other really quick things. Of course, you can hire a coach. So you can hire a coach to help you practice dealing with conflict. You can look at the HAR webinars and courses list, because there are some where communication and conflict is built in, whether it's marketing or whether it's branding or whether it is in the sales process. If you're part of a brokerage, it might be worth investing for the brokerage to have brokerage-based training in resolving conflict. And resolving conflict is not the same as overcoming objections. Can I just say that again? In sales, focus is overcoming objections. And you may use those skills, but the conflict or the really difficult conversations is when you've used overcoming objections training and there's something still happening that is causing miscommunication. And then the final thing that comes to mind is if you are a member of one of the affiliate associations, pay attention to the monthly or quarterly programming, because this is a topic: communication, overcoming sales resistance, but doing it in a healthy way, cross-cultural communication. There are topics that your professional affiliate groups are offering. So don't overlook that opportunity, because it comes at a really nominal cost. And then just practice.
Of course. Well, I have a few more important questions for you, Tracy. But before we jump into those final few questions, a quick reminder to everyone that this week's Member Focus Monday and HAR on the Move podcast are sponsored by the Woodlands Hills. Let's take a quick look at what they have to offer. So thank you again to the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities for your support. You can visit thewoodlandshills.com for more information. Tracy, so how can handling these situations actually strengthen client relationships?
That's so easy. When you handle situations like this, you are putting yourself in a position to earn the respect of the people you're working with. You build trust, which not only helps that particular situation, but when you build that kind of trust, then it often turns into referrals, and it helps you secure the deal, the immediate deal and future deals that may become available. So easy: respect, trust, business expansion.
Love it. Thank you so much. Well, you've shared a lot of great stuff today. You always do, and we already had some people saying just thank you so much. They appreciate everything you have to share today and how it's going to help them. If we had to break it all down into one takeaway, what's one takeaway that you want every realtor to remember when it comes to handling difficult situations or conversations?
Conflict in itself is not a sign of failure. Conflict is not a sign of failure. Conflict is inevitable. The more people you engage with, and how you navigate through difficult situations, is what makes all the difference.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tracy, for being here and sharing your insight. These are real situations that agents face every day, and having the right approach can really make an impact on your business and relationships. So we appreciate your time today, Tracy.
Thanks, Christina.
Thank you. Well, for those watching, take a moment to think about how you handle difficult conversations and where you might be able to improve and use some of Tracy's guidance and tips, because small shifts can go a long way. Another quick thank you to the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities for your support of this week's Member Focus Monday and HAR on the Move podcast. You can visit thewoodlandshills.com for more information there, and be sure to join us next week, where we will talk about how to avoid burnout with Tammy Benefil. So that's going to be another important conversation. So that is it for this Member Focus Monday. We will see you all next week. Have a good one. Bye-bye.